When Jesus told parables, he was revealing the reality that he had already created. When we tell analogies, we're looking at things God has made and figuring out how we can tell something that we want to compare it to. But Jesus had the advantage that he created all of the things that he was going to use as examples. And in Luke 13 through 16, Jesus repeatedly uses banquets to reveal God's kingdom. And God made both the concept of throwing a party with food that you invite people to and his kingdom. He made them both, and when he compares them, he's telling us how they're actually related. Jesus attending banquets, he constantly pointed out several things at a banquet. And when we arrive to a party, we're filling roles that God created. It's kind of like you can do a creative staging of a play, like when VeggieTales does Shakespeare, right? But when we arrive to a party, we're not just doing VeggieTales Shakespeare, we're arriving and filling a role that God created for us to be in. So as we read these things about a party, these are the things that keep coming up. There's this idea of people going up or down in honor, or being inside or outside of the party. And I hope that the next time you go to a party, you remember that a party is a reflection of God's kingdom. So let's see how that works. Jesus is going to talk us through that in Luke 14. One Sabbath, when Jesus went to eat, it literally says to eat bread, in the house of a prominent Pharisee, he was being carefully watched. And there in front of him was a man suffering from dropsy. And Jesus asked the Pharisees and the experts in the law, "Is it lawful to heal on the Sabbath or not?" But they remained silent. So taking hold of the man, he healed him and sent him away. Then he asked them, "If one of you has a son or an ox that falls into a well on the Sabbath, will you not immediately pull him out?" And they had nothing to say. Okay, so Jesus is at a party. Jesus is often eating with the lowly, but we forget that Jesus is actually willing to accept invitations from Pharisees as well. Jesus was willing to associate with sinners of all kinds, which is good news for us. Whether you are a lowly sinner or a proud sinner, Jesus was willing to show up to the party. And breaking bread with someone is actually the basis of a peace treaty, since the first time you find someone breaking bread in the book of Genesis, it's Melchizedek breaking bread with Abraham. And eating specifically bread is a very symbolic thing of saying we're not in conflict. And Jesus is going to this party with them. Now, we have this up and down thing going on too. Do you notice how much judging is going on? They're watching Jesus because they want to see if he's going to behave himself at this party. And there are at least one lowly person at this party. There's someone who's sick at this party. And Jesus makes the point, Jesus not only often attended parties, he often healed on the Sabbath, and he's combining these two things here. And he makes a point that he made the last time he healed someone on the Sabbath. He said, "You guys are mad because I'm healing someone on the Sabbath, but you guys will let your ox or your donkey out to get a drink on the Sabbath." This time he ratchets it up a level. Last time they needed a drink of water. This time you're saving them from drowning in water. You'd be willing to save your animal or your son, or even your animal. Why wouldn't you care about this guy who needs to be healed? There's also probably another thing going on with water that we don't hear in English by the name of this disease, dropsy. This is not a disease we normally talk about. It's literally water retention. He's saving this guy from water. Isn't that weird? He's got too much water in his body. And it's almost like what's being talked about here is not just water retention, but honor retention. We're going to see that these guys at this party want all the honor, and they're going to gorge themselves on it and fill up on it. And then we've got this inside or outside thing too, where this guy seems like, it seems like the host of this banquet may have had a bigger understanding of God's kingdom than the other people at his party. Because he invited at least one guy who needed to be healed. He's not excluding them from the party. So we've got a picture of that coming. And this guy is sent away at the end. This is the only time that getting sent out of the party is a good thing. He's probably giving him his ability to walk back. He's giving him his life back. He's giving him a blessing and saying, go in peace, like he has with the other people. From now on, leaving the party is going to be a bad thing. So we're now going to move on from a physical banquet, where the question was, are we going to heal or not, to a proverbial banquet. When he noticed how the guests picked the places of honor at the table, he told them this parable. When someone invites you to a wedding feast, do not take the place of honor. For a person more distinguished than you may have been invited. And if so, the host who invited both of you will come and say to you, give this man your seat. Then, humiliated, you will have to take the least important place. But when you're invited, take the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he'll say to you, friend, move up to a better place. Then you'll be honored in the presence of your fellow guests. That's actually advice almost directly out of Proverbs 25. For anyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and he who humbles himself will be exalted, which is also almost a direct quote out of Isaiah 2. Then Jesus said to his host, when you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers or your relatives or your rich neighbors. If you do, they may invite you back, and then you will be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed. Although they cannot repay you, you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous. You know, liking the best seats at the party is part of what Jesus said was the woes against the Pharisees. This is actually one of their biggest problems. They want the best seats. It's interesting that Luke calls this a parable, but then this seems like advice for a party directly out of Proverbs. This is actually real advice before it becomes a parable, before it becomes a deeper lesson. This is good life advice. Guests, let the kings give you a better seat, it says in Proverbs. Hosts, lend to the poor and you'll be repaid by God. That's also right there in Proverbs. And this repayment is going to happen at the resurrection. In the Old Testament, God's kingdom is described as a banquet in Isaiah 25. They already understood that being invited to God's banquet is what you're looking forward to at the resurrection of the righteous. It's interesting that the phrase is resurrection of the righteous, because in Daniel 12, where this comes from, it says that we will all be raised, the righteous to their reward and the wicked to punishment. It says that in Acts 24 also. We're not just looking forward to rising again after we die. We're looking forward to good things from God at his banquet when we rise. That's what a party is already on earth. This real party they're at is a proverb or a parable for heaven. And then, do you see the up or down element here too? If you humble yourself, humble is making yourself low, then God's the one who will lift you up. Can we be honest for a moment here? You can make just as big a nuisance of yourself by fighting over the lowest seat as you can by fighting over the highest seat, right? Jesus is not just giving us new things to fight over, as though we should be fighting over the lowest spot. He's not trying to give us new rules for fighting for our own honor. He's trying to remove this, replace this with a humility that says, God, I'll sit where you want me to sit, right? Let the host seat you where he wants you to be seated. We get so caught up on which seat we're going to have at the feast, we forget that the whole point is getting to the feast. Okay? The reward is not ultimately the best seat at the feast, but being at the feast. See, there's an in versus out thing with this banquet also. Jesus said that the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame are those we should be inviting to the feast. You know what? It's actually better to invite this group of outsiders who need to be at the feast and give them the worst place than to not invite them at all, right? But even better would be to treat everyone at the party as Christ treated them, because Jesus has invited us to a party we don't belong at. See, that's the thing that everybody at this party believes. I deserve to be at this party, and I deserve the best seat I can get at this party. And you know what? If we're honest, we don't deserve to be at the party at all. We should be thankful that we're there, and when we throw parties, we should be inviting the people who don't deserve to be there. Here's what the feast at the resurrection will be like. We now move from a proverbial banquet to the parable of the banquet. When one of those at the table heard Jesus say this, he said to Jesus, "Blessed is the man who will eat bread at the feast in the kingdom of God." Jesus replied, "A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who had been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first said, 'I've just bought a field. I must go and see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I've bought 5 yoke of oxen, and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' Still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servants, 'Go out quickly into the streets and the alleys of the town. Bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.'" Do you recognize that group? "Sir," the servant said, "what you ordered has been done, but there's still more room." Then the master told his servants, "Go out into the roads and the country lanes and make them come in so that my house will be full. I tell you that not one of those men who were invited will get a taste of my banquet." Do you notice that Jesus' audience is already thinking of a banquet as God's kingdom? They knew that's what Jesus was talking about here. In a parable, we talked about this in our adult Sunday school class today, sometimes there's a temptation to try to look for what every single thing in the allegory means. Like, what are those cows supposed to represent? Why is there 5 of them? Is it because there's 5 books of the Pentateuch in the Old Testament, and then there's pairs because of the 10 Commandments? That doesn't seem to be what Jesus is talking about at all. Looking for odd coincidences that match up is not the point of this parable. The point of this parable is that God is the one who's throwing a banquet. He's the one with the party. And he's inviting us, and he's sending out servants to invite people to this party. We can look at the servants God has sent. He sent prophets in the Old Testament. He sent us Jesus. He sent us his apostles. And ultimately, he's sending us. We're all part of this group that's inviting people to this banquet. But we're also those being invited to the banquet. And we can either give excuses or accept the invitation. Okay, do you see the up versus down here? This is about the lowly getting into the banquet and the rich not getting in. But it's also about in and out, right? The parable is probably, Jesus tells this story again in Matthew 22, and when he does, he shuffles around the details a little bit. There's a thought that this might have been a real story that they knew about a guy who tried to throw a party. The rich people wouldn't come, so he invited the poor. And so Jesus is reusing a story that they knew, and when he would tell it, he'd focus on something a little different. In Matthew 22, the point of the parable seems to be emphasizing that no one deserves to attend the banquet. In that one, he gives them wedding clothes. He fights the guys who won't come. He sends an army to destroy them. He gives them all wedding clothes, and one guy won't wear them, and then he gets kicked out. The point in Matthew 22 is about people not deserving to be there, and the king providing it for them. In this version, it seems to be that the emphasis is on the excuses. Okay, did you hear their excuses? These are excuses to get out of army service in Deuteronomy. You're allowed out of army service if you've just bought a field, a vineyard, you've just got new land, you've gotten married, you're excused from the army to go work on that. Now, do you see what they're doing? They are treating the invitation to a party as something that they want to get out of and are willing to use excuses that will keep you out of the army. They're saying your wedding invitation, your invitation to go with to heaven, is as distasteful to me as being drafted into the army. I'm going to look for any way out I possibly can. That's not the way to treat an invitation to the party thrown by God. Remember, that's how this started. A guy says, "Blessed is everyone who gets to go to the feast in the kingdom of God." And Jesus says, actually, here's how it really works. Most of you are trying to get out of it any way you possibly can. Isn't that weird? That's what we think of God's invitation. And do you notice who gets in? It's the outsiders. It's that group that Jesus said you should invite to your parties. And Jesus was not only willing to eat with Pharisees, but sinners. He wasn't even only willing to eat with Jews, but was willing to eat with Gentiles. Jesus is letting the people into the party who don't deserve to be there and who are not making excuses. And the gospel is hiding here in this parable. You see, the people who get into the banquet don't deserve it. You want to see a room full of people like this? Here we are. We are the people who don't deserve to go to this banquet. But we get in because the master wants a full house. And he says, I've got good stuff. See, Jesus even compares himself to a banquet. Jesus isn't just preparing bread for us to eat. When Jesus died, he said, my body is your bread. This is it. I'm giving my whole life to you to make a treaty with you. Come in, eat with me, and eat me. And that's the gospel. Don't make excuses and try to get out of this. This is good. And we get in on it. And then Jesus says this is how it concludes with a banquet that is an invitation to the ultimate banquet. I got to ask this as we read this. It seems like we've changed the topic from a banquet. But I want you to notice the two things that continue. Excuses and the invitation to come to Jesus. That's what this is really about. Here's what Jesus says about the ultimate invitation to the banquet. Large crowds were traveling with Jesus, and turning to them, he said, if anyone wants to come to me and does not hate his father and mother, his wife and children, his brothers and sisters, and yes, even his own life, he cannot be my disciple. And anyone who does not carry his cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. Suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Will he not first sit down and estimate the cost to see if he has enough money to complete it? For if he lays the foundation and is not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule him, saying, this fellow began to build and was not able to finish. Or suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Will he not first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000 men? If he's not able, he'll send a delegation while the other is still a long way off and ask for terms of peace. In the same way, any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Salt is good, but if it loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It is neither fit for the soil nor the manure pile. It is thrown out. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Do you remember that the guests at the banquet loved their fields, their oxen, and their family more than the banquet? and the guests didn't consider the time commitment of going to the banquet to be worth it, Jesus is challenging us now with those same things. Do you love everything else you've got more than coming to the banquet? And do you consider the banquet worth the invitation to come to? We still have this theme of up and down going on here. The reasons Jesus gave in his analogies of building a tower or fighting an army, fighting a battle, is that everybody's watching to see whether you're going to actually follow through, whether you're going to go or not. And people will see, and they might ridicule you for only going halfway and not getting all the way there. See, this is about who you love most, showing so much love for Jesus that it makes all other loves look like hate by comparison. When Jesus says this in Matthew, he says that you can't love your family more than me. Here in Luke, he says, hate them. He doesn't actually mean hate them. We talked about this in Sunday school today too. If Jesus' command is to literally hate your family, that's the only commandment that anyone is obeying in the Bible, right? No, he doesn't mean to hate them. He means to love Jesus more. Count going to the party as more valuable than anything else. Did you also see how in the end this ends with an in versus out? Salt is good, but if it's not salty, it's not useful for anything else. And it's interesting that in Jesus' other parables, what you're thrown out of is the party. The last time Jesus talked about parties in Luke 13, there's these guys who get thrown out of the party. And now he says, guys, come to me. Salt is good as long as it's salty. If not, you throw it out and it's not good for anything. And this is another time where we ask, what does salt mean and what does it do? Is it a preservative? Is it a flavoring? Can salt actually lose its saltiness? All of these things. And it seems like the short point of this is God has made you to be salt. He's made you to be one of the people who's coming to the party. He's made you to be one who loves the poor, the crippled, that group. He's made you to be that. And if you won't be that, what's the point? That's what you're made to be. Be what you're made to be. And then he says, if you have ears to hear, let him hear. Last week was Pentecost. And we read the story from Acts about how the first thing they heard was the noise of the wind. And hearing a noise is different than hearing words. The next thing they heard was, whoa, these guys are speaking in our own language. And then they said, now we can hear that they're talking to us about the wonders of God and Jesus. And that's another kind of hearing, but this is the last kind of hearing, is hearing to understand. Here's the ultimate point. You've been invited to a banquet. The banquet is real. Are you going to come? Are you going to be salt or are you going to be thrown out? Now, this ends in a spot that leaves us going, uh-oh, do you mean I can mess this up badly enough that I can never get in again? Like, I can mess this up. I'm salt and I have to be salt, otherwise I'm in big trouble, right? Does that leave you feeling that way? We don't have time to read Luke 15 today. We'll read it next time. But the stories in Luke 15 are three parables of something that's lost and found. A coin that's lost and found, a sheep that's lost and found, and a son that's lost and found. God can do the impossible. He can bring back people who don't deserve to be there, and he can bring them to the party, and he can bring them back to the party. So here's the conclusion. Remember, God's the one who created banquets as a picture of his kingdom. He created both the banquet and his kingdom. We saw this in a physical banquet where the question is whether to heal or not. At the party, we saw the party did include some low people, and Jesus healed them. They were focused on their position in that. The proverbial banquet, we should not be so concerned about our own honor that we are fighting for it ourselves, but leave it to God. We saw from the parable of the banquet that we've been invited to a party. The question is, at the ultimate banquet, Do you count the cost of giving up everything else so you can have the banquet as worth the trade? Or are you going to say to God, heaven, I don't really want to go there. Is there like an exemption I can use to get out of it? That's insane. That's just absolutely insane. But that's what we're actually like. Okay? And I hope that the next time you're at a party, whether you're the guest who's invited or the host who's throwing it, that you remember these are the roles you're being asked to play. It's a picture of heaven that God made to show how Jesus is the one who died to save you. Your sins are forgiven, and you're accepted into the party only because he's good.